Hello and hi, friends. So today I am detailing how I created my inclusive lesson plan over the endangered animals of the Amazon rainforest for my sixth grade social studies class. My class is a blended classroom of 30 wonderful kiddos, 15 of which have different levels of abilities and different disability types. Before we dive into how I go about creating my inclusive lesson plans and how I manage my blended classroom, let's take a peek at the lesson plan in question. Now, presuming you've already looked over the lesson plan in detail, I'd like to just kind of go over real briefly how the class period will play out. So after students randomly draw the endangered animal they'll be researching during class, students will have time to write down their current questions about their animals. This is the I Wonder poem. This is an activity I frequently use in my classroom to get students to just warm up their noggins and engage with the lesson. So they do already know what to do with the I Wonder poem. Always remember there are no wrong questions here. It's just a great little activity for a free flow of thoughts, free flow of engaging inquiry. Now, the main activity of the lesson is researching their particular animal and creating an infographic about that animal. At the end of class, everyone will tape their animal's infographic in the appropriate spot in our super cool dramatic play corner that is currently dressed up as the Amazon rainforest. So, for instance, if Ella researched the hyacinth macaw, she would tape her infographic high up in the canopies of our craft paper kapok tree. Then we will wrap up class with my particular favorite see you later alligator activity, the exit slip. So in the final 5 minutes of class, I ask students to answer a prompt that requires them to recall what they've learned today. In this case, my exit slip will have the prompts, quote, the most interesting thing I learned about blank, they'll write their animal name there, today is dot, dot, dot. Or another prompt is why should we save endangered animals? I leave it up to them which question to answer. Giving them those options kind of gives them that sense of agency. I feel like little autonomous beings. So moving on, how exactly do I meet the needs of all of my students in a blended classroom? Well, a blended classroom calls for a blended approach. We're going to take a look at how I use accommodations, modifications, ESL strategies, and inclusion teaching methods to level the playing field, if you will, of my classroom and ensure that I meet the needs of all 30 of my students. Now, accommodations don't change what students learn, nor do they change what students are asked to do. Rather, they change how students learn and how they get their work done. So, considering my students and this particular lesson, I may have some students use the computer, usually like their own Chromebooks. In my particular classroom, each student has their own Chromebook. So, I'll have students use their Chromebook to fill out the pre-made digital animal infographic templates that I've created prior to class period. And they can print their infographics out through that template instead of creating them with art supplies, if that's not their thing or if the art supplies are going to slow them down. This is kind of an easier way to attack the infographic. So this would be like a great accommodation for Becky, who would benefit from the ease of the template by being able to potentially work quicker than she would be able to by writing. I will provide reading guide highlighter strips. I particularly love these and actually use them myself still. Also allowing speech to text and text to speech software, like a reading pen. These are great accommodations for students with dyslexia in particular, like Baron, Jay, Khan, and Tony. They would all get a lot of benefits out of utilizing these accommodations. So because I will be playing an audio clip of the sounds of the rainforest during activity time, I will be sure to provide noise canceling headphones to Danny, who is autistic and highly sensitive to the overstimulation of a noisy environment. So these noise canceling headphones will help him, remain calm and focused on his work, and he won't get so distracted by the sound clips that I'm playing for the rest of the class to enjoy. Some students may continue working on their infographics for homework as well and bring them back to class at a later date, like Abby and Danny, who typically do need more time to complete their assignments than a typical class period allows. I am always sure to post an illustrated word wall for all students and provide individual word banks for some. This is especially important to Evelyn, who benefits from these ESL strategies, like the illustrated word wall, for her to refer to and see a photo of the word in English to help kind of trigger her recognition of the word or recall the word. Now, finally, for some students, I provide advanced organizers and graphic organizers. The advanced organizers are useful for students like Pam, who will benefit from the organization of the lesson and instructions because she does have some difficulty comprehending oral instructions and following along as I give even a brief lecture. So the advanced organizer just kind of gives her almost like a follow along so that she doesn't get too lost in the oral instruction. Frankly, all of my students benefit from the graphic organizer. This is a great tool to refer to when they're creating their infographic. It lays out the expectations and gives them a good idea of the organization of the infographic to help refer to and stay on task and know that they're progressing the way I expect them to. Now, moving on to modifications. Now, as opposed to accommodations, modifications are actual changes to what the student is taught or what I expect them to actually do. Um, Please note here, only students with an IEP or a 504 plan can actually have true modifications. In the case of this particular lesson, I may ask some students to only come up with just 3 I wonder questions, like Baron and Jay, who do write at a slower rate. Some students may be asked for reduced information about their animal rather than asking them to freely research and kind of get lost in the resources. For them, I would provide explicit questions that help kind of guide their research. This is a great approach for students like Craig who do have trouble staying on task because of their ADHD. And then some students may be excused from the I Wonder poems entirely, or asked to verbally make their inquiry, if at all. Uh, Specifically, like excusing a student like Eric from reading their poem aloud, uh, and instead perhaps just writing it, then that's beneficial because although he is a proficient reader, and a writer. He absolutely loathes reading aloud. He has voiced this concern very explicitly. Uh, and I'm not too worried because his reading comprehension is good. He is a proficient reader. There is no need to stress him out and force him to read aloud when it is something that would possibly trigger bad behavior or just in general upset him. Like that's disrespecting what he would like, and it's completely reasonable for him to opt out of reading aloud when it makes him extremely uncomfortable. So, in my fantasy world, all class periods will go swimmingly and without disruption at all. But, that's not reality. So what do we do when a student does act out and disrupt the class period? For me personally, in the immediate moment of a disruption, I try to take a deep breath, just stay calm, and make sure you actually listen to the student concerns. I work to try to identify what possibly caused the disruption. I remember to acknowledge the feelings of the student. This isn't particularly hard for me to do as a complete empath, but I know that's something that some teachers may struggle with in the heat of the moment, um, depending on the just how disruptive the behavior is, or if it's like a repetitive disruptive behavior. We're human too, and that can be triggering to us and upsetting. So just got to remember, try to stay calm, try to take that deep breath. Try to remember that this disruptive behavior is often caused by stress or frustration. Try to kind of suss out where that stress and frustration came from and how we can avoid that happening again. I try to address the disruption individually, directly, and immediately. I decide when the situation should be truly dealt with after I've initially shut the behavior down. Perhaps it would be best to, calm the behavior down and then tell my student that I would like to speak to them after class. We're gonna, you know, work together to figure out what was going on. Definitely avoid making it a class issue by addressing only the student who's causing the disruption. Never blaming, never ridiculing or using sarcasm, still maintaining respect. Acknowledging the feelings of the student, they are valid. Muster up your empathy, show this empathy, show that you respect them. If you can't show that to your students, I mean, how can we expect that in return? Now, however I do decide to proceed, I make sure to remain steady, consistent, and firm. While many disruptions are minor, hopefully, fingers crossed, and can be managed in the moment, it can be super beneficial to document the incident and then follow up with the student. So I can't stress the documentation enough. Document, 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 document. We must be documenting what happened, the steps that we took would be a really great addition to this documentation, especially if you're going to decide that you need to pursue reporting a violation of the student code of conduct. And it certainly covers your own buns in the case of the caregiver or parent raising concerns over how the situation was handled. Um, I'd like to go ahead and note to remember to stay aware of your own limitations, always operating within your own scope of comfort. There is no shame at all in having to call your campus PD or administrators in order to protect yourself and your other students. With all of this said, though, I would like to point out how to potentially avoid disruptive behavior altogether. And to do this, I like to establish classroom behavioral expectations at the start of the school year. This can help reduce or hopefully even totally prevent disruptive behavior. So in my classroom, we abide by classroom promises. Rather than the traditional class rules, these are the promises my students and I make to each other in my classroom. You would seriously not believe how much these promises, rather than rules, have changed the climate of my classroom. Students have this sense of ownership, and they'll even call each other out when someone isn't following up on their promises. So, in our class, we promise that we are a team, we are positive, we respect each other, we try our best, we make good choices, we are kind, we are honest, we listen to each other, we work hard, we encourage each other, and we are all important. Well, that about wraps it up. I'd like to thank you so very much, friends. I had a blast sharing a glimpse into my little slice of inclusive heaven. Please reach out with any questions, comments, concerns. In the meantime, stay kind, stay humble, and keep it real.